All right, we are live. Greetings and welcome to Obscuria Filmcast, where we discuss cult films and other weird movies that most people have never heard of before. Today, we will be doing Judy's selection. It is Saint Maude from 2019. It's an A24 production. I believe it's our first A24 film, and it is written and directed by Rose Glass and starring Morfydd. How do I Morfydd Clark. I hope I pronounced her name correctly. It is Welsh, and I'm not well versed in Welsh. And anyway, Judy, please
hmm
tell us a little bit about why you selected this film, and then what's this
hmm
movie all about, and we will take
Okay.
it from there.
Okay. So I selected this film probably over the summer. I was reading one of those, I forget which blog I was on, and it was talking about, horror films to check out. And so I saw Saint Maud, and I watched the trailer, and I thought it looked interesting. And and I liked that it was written and directed by a woman. And so I watched it, and probably for about the first like 10, 20 minutes, I thought like, "Oh, I don't know about this." And maybe even into the first half hour, I thought, because I had read that the film was supposed to come to America cinema, theatrical release, but then COVID hit, and so that didn't happen because it was made in 2019. And I thought, that was probably a good thing because I was like, I don't know if this film would have done so well. And so what I really liked about the film, it's a great, fantastic character study. It's really filmed very well. The plot is really simple. But I would say for me, the what I liked about it the most, because I actually then watched it. I think actually I watched it before I selected it. And at first I was like, oh, I think this is a bad choice. But then I watched the movie and I just was so intrigued with the way that they film it is completely through the character's eyes. So every scene is the lead character is in Maude, who's actually Katie. And so I watched the film and I just thought like, okay, like yeah, it's good. But then I became like obsessed thinking about it for like 2 days after, because you could watch, even though I believe I understood the film, and after watching some interviews with the director, I understood what she was doing, but it can be sort of seen different ways. And the director Rose was saying how people had very different interpretations of the ending, of like what it meant, which I just think says so much, because the whole story is told through, it's basically, I don't know if it's mental illness, but it's a psychological horror. And so it really touches on human psychology. It really is a story. It's almost, I love that it's a horror film, and that it touches upon things like Rosemary's Baby and Carrie, and they reference Taxi Driver a lot, about like an anti-hero, and she's just like, she's very lost, and so I think it's sort of like a warning, I feel like, where people who are ostracized and left out and misunderstood and don't get the help that they need can really go off a deep end. And I like how she didn't do the standard, religious Catholicism. The director said that that was a choice that she made. That she originally had written one draft where she was like a devout Catholic growing up, and like religion made her crazy or whatever. But then she switched it to, what if she wasn't at all, and then she found religion through her search for sort of like the meaning of life, and then just like took it to the nth degree. So I just really like the story. I'm curious what you guys hear, because I watched it last night with my husband, and he was like, "Yeah, it was okay. It's kind of boring, you know." And so, but I think of my husband as like, even though he is a patron of the arts, and he, like I feel like he's more of a TV watcher. He loves like really complicated storylines, really intricate things, and so we had this conversation. And I also love movies that you can have a conversation about after. They're good date movies. I don't know if everyone would want to see this movie as a date, but it would at least be like an interesting conversation. And there's a sex scene, even though it's
Yeah.
kind of sad. And I did read someone said it was a rape scene, and I was like, I don't totally agree that it was a
I
rape
mean, who
scene.
who was raped?
Yeah, I don't know. Well, they said that she was raped in it, and I was like,
Right.
I
Oh, because
that's a gray
after, yeah,
area.
she ends up, okay, yeah,
She
no,
has,
I
like,
could
that
see.
moment where she has, like, a flashback or some sort of,
She's having a flashback to the accident where she was unsuccessfully administering CPR.
Right.
or something like that, because the chest went in. It was like
Yeah,
it was kind of all distorted. I don't know if
I,
see, that's where I feel like she's seeing things that aren't really happening based
well,
on real
okay,
things that probably
there's,
happened.
yeah, okay. So one thing I've noticed in the film is that yeah, this film is largely shot through her point of view, but it
Mhm,
shows, it seems to be trying to show you her hallucinations, and then intertwined with what's actually objectively happening.
yeah,
So I think the point of view is trying to it's trying to show you what she sees in her own hallucination, but then
mhm,
also what's actually going on. And sometimes those cuts are really fast,
yeah,
so it's hard to catch.
mhm,
But there's several such instances like that. Obviously, the scene where she's stabbing the former patient to death, where the patient is she's hallucinating that the patient is some kind of a demon,
mhm,
and then it shows her actually just like human and dead, like with
mhm.
a pair of scissors in her neck. The scene where she's in
Spoiler alert.
Yeah,
and yeah, of course, the scene where she's in cowgirl sexual position on top of the guy, and she's telling him like to. He keeps trying to put his hands up, and she's like trying to be very controlling in that such situation. And then she starts hallucinating that she's giving CPR to the patient that she was unable to save, which is what
mm,
happened. That was the trauma that she had in her previous job when she worked for the clinic or whatever. And but it's also interspersed with her like this hallucination. So there's the memory of her administering CPR, then there's the hallucination of her
mhm.
crushing this guy's chest, and then there's her freak out response to it where she kind of goes like numb, and then they have this really uncomfortable finishing of the sex scene where she's just kind of laying there kind of comatose,
Yeah, he
and
kind
which
of
I
pretends to, like, take care of her. He's like, "Shh, it's okay," and then he basically, like, pushes her down and finishes. That's
yeah,
pretty
it's
much what
hard.
it is. It's
Yeah, it's an very uncomfortable scene. And then the
And then
scene
he
at
makes,
the
and then he
sorry,
makes a remark about
Yeah.
she was before she was religious.
yeah, that he
mhm,
recognizes her as
Yeah,
this
from
promiscuous party girl that used to
yeah,
go
yeah,
hook up with her with his best mate. You know.
yeah,
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I thought the film was like really like I thought it was done really well. It was concise. It wasn't. I didn't find the film to be too mysterious. Like everything to me made perfect sense.
mhm,
Sequentially, everything, not necessarily in the moment that you're watching it, but when everything all gets tied together. I think like it's a film about somebody who's kind of lost their mind, or at least had a very unhealthy, unhinged religious experience, which is another way of saying lost their mind. And um, this is why in most religions there's like prohibitions against doing certain rituals by yourself,
mm,
and relying on and like relying on prophecy, receiving prophecy that's kind of devoid from anything relevant to what's going on. Like
mm,
you can't like to just claim you hear the voice of God on your own and just spew that out there and say this God told me to do this and God told me to do that, and there's no standard, or not having a healthy standard, which is to say like
yeah,
throughout all of history God has not wanted you to do this kind of behavior. So if you're hearing God tell you to do this, or you're hearing some deity tell you to do this, that's not correct. That's actually a delusion, because we have a standard that says that God would never tell you to do that.
yeah,
And so it's sort of like, as Judy was describing in the beginning, it's definitely a portrait of what happens to people what could happen to somebody if they become too isolated, rely
mhm,
too much on their own mind to try to figure out the world around them, and then just sort of go deeper and deeper into a delusion without
Mhm.
any support system to sort of rein them in. And that does happen quite often. It's a thing that happens in our culture. We see this mental health crisis in our society. It's a crisis of loneliness. I think it's no
mhm,
surprise that this film came out when it did, and the fact that it came out during COVID, I think was kind of prescient, because this is a time when lots of people were really lonely and isolated. And I think at the end of the day, it's a relatively simple film about loneliness, isolation, and desperation, and how, you know, somebody goes off the deep end, you know. I don't know. Maybe somebody has another angle to add to it, but I saw it as a pretty straightforward film.
I think that A24 loves collecting movies like this.
Oh, like, yeah, for sure.
I mean, they with you know, with Whale and with Midsummer and Hereditary, and they like loneliness and madness and off the wall points of view and self torture and you know, human and realism, like a dark realism to most of their stuff. Although
and they have a loyal, dedicated fan base that will continue to eat it all up every time they come out with a film like that.
They're loyal, but they also fight with each other like cats and dogs.
Yeah. It's amazing.
It's really amazing.
Shout out to the Facebook A24 Facebook group.
Yeah,
oh, really?
They're great.
I wasn't aware.
Yeah, we have
to go check them out.
Great.
Seth ruined my life with that.
I had to get off. I'm sorry if any of them are there. You guys were just you're pulling me down a hole. I just couldn't stand how like one of you would be like Jennifer Connelly this, and then for the whole next week it'd just be, or it'd be like, you know, Michelle Yeoh that, and this is the whole week just shit, and then it would be dead for a little while, and then someone would go back to the comment, and then why Hereditary, and they oh man.
Wait, while we're at it, shout out. Sorry, go ahead, Dan.
I'm sorry, out of curiosity, how many people are in this A24 Facebook group?
A lot, like 10,000.
Can you give me a number?
Like 10,000.
Oh, okay, well that's niche.
I mean, that's pretty big for a Facebook. Yeah, it's niche. I guess. I don't know. Maybe it's more. I'll look it up in a second. But shout out to A24 for like winning the Grammys. The Oscars.
Yeah.
For winning the Oscars. Like they won everything, basically. And I don't think they've ever done that before.
And they've come out of like nowhere in the last 10 years.
No, and my greatest beef is that there's not enough competition to A24.
Well, they're not a small independent film production company anymore. I think they're somewhere in the realm of like $5 billion company now.
I understand that. My complaint is that A24 is the brand of realism pushing the envelope cinema that we have in the Anglosphere, and it's not enough. That's my complaint.
Oh, I agree. I'm sorry.
I know the reason why it is that way.
Yeah, of course.
But I'm still complaining.
Dan, I agree with you. I'm totally with you on that. And by the way, I stand corrected. It's 152,000 members.
That makes more sense. It makes more sense.
And I'm going to invite you right now.
Please, thank you. I'd enjoy that.
And also, congratulations, A24, on your purchase of the Cherry Lane Theater. For $11 million
really?
This week.
Yeah. Mazel tov.
For $1 million?
Mazel tov.
$11 million. They bought the Cherry Lane Theater.
Okay.
And they promise that it will remain for at least a while as a functioning theater. So I guess we can watch like Florence Pugh do Chekhov and other stars that they like. Do an A24 film, and this summer we'll let you do, you know, what have you. And and the woman that one of the reasons I didn't end up marrying was because of Judy discovered the script for The Whale, which is an A24, because Judy said I should be with a goddess, not that dramaturg. Just saying.
Yes.
Like, yeah. But she discovered The Whale, so
that was in a drunken stupor too.
I'm going to ask a provocative question.
Yes.
And because I don't really have any substantial, I shouldn't say substantial, but I don't really have any large criticism of the film, except that I want to know from you guys why I don't feel the way about this film the way I do Rosemary's Baby or Taxi Driver. What
I don't
separates
either.
what separates the craftsmanship?
I mean, because this is essentially like a short film that was stretched
I was
into an
gonna
hour
say-
and 24
Yeah.
minutes.
I
It
was
doesn't,
gonna
there's
say-
not enough things that happen in it. There's not enough of a story. It's
Okay.
more like a painting, like a 1 hour and 24-minute painting.
I was going to.
That's my
this is my
takeaway.
trouble. This is my trouble with A24, and I'm going to get in trouble for this.
You're in big trouble, Dan.
I'm in big trouble now.
You're gonna go to A24 jail.
Well, okay.
I'm kidding. Go
They
ahead.
make a lot of extended short films
Yeah, you're right.
because they develop directors and they see these amazing short films, and a lot of these directors don't know how to make a feature in terms of storytelling.
I agree.
And I'm in trouble now. But I that's how I felt about this
I got
movie.
your back, bro.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I agree. I really liked the
Okay, it
film.
It doesn't
but I
make me
agree.
dislike it, but
Yeah.
No,
I
I didn't.
agree with you.
First of all, she's an extremely talented director. I mean, I love the photography. I loved how she handled, the dynamics between her and her patient and other smaller characters. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it felt like a 25-minute movie that was pushed to 90 minutes in terms of content.
And I think that we could actually put that in a good light and say, it's kind of cool that it's almost like a new genre style of filmmaking where it is a very kind of moody and evocative and vibey, and it gives the filmmaker an opportunity to let certain aspects of filmmaking shine. Whereas when a film is very, normally like very story driven, you're not going to be as absorbed in the imagery, and it's a different kind of film. It's almost like a different thing altogether. You could almost say it's not like traditional filmmaking.
Let's go
different.
Let's go deeper. What are the elements, story-wise, narrative-wise, that is in Rosemary's Baby and Taxi Driver that is not in this? How can you define?
Okay, that's interesting.
There's a level of paranoia in Rosemary's Baby and caring about her that I was interested in this story, but I never felt scared in this movie for a horror movie.
Also,
I thought it looked beautiful, and I thought the acting was great, and they were listening to each other, and but I felt like this is a story in the post that I'm going to read and I'm going to forget about when I get to my stop. Whereas Rosemary's Baby, I can watch over and over and over again. And
can you define that from a screenwriting?
I can define it from a screenwriting standpoint. Just thinking in terms of like, just look at how many moving parts there are in Rosemary's Baby compared to a film like this. This is basically it's the fever dream of the protagonist, and everybody else and their motivations are very like, they're not even, they don't affect the plot at all. Rosemary's Baby, it's like this conspiracy where you have like all these different characters. You could actually make the movie, you could change the movie and make it like 5 different ways. It could be, you could change Rosemary's Baby and do a different angle where it's all more about from the point of view, where you get all of the behind the scenes information about what happened between her husband and the devil worshippers, and every single one, almost every character could have their own movie. In this one, the only other character that really has a lot of life to her in terms of like, I want to know this person must have an interesting story, would be the dying dancer woman that she's taking care of. That could have been fleshed out a little bit more. They could have gone into more detail about her background. There's just not a lot of backstory.
So you're saying the layers of the character development and the layers that are created in relationships between characters is more developed in a Rosemary's Baby. Well, then how about Taxi Driver?
In Taxi Driver, it's less so than in Rosemary's Baby, but it's still a lot more than in this film because you have more colorful characters. You've got the politician, you've got the girl the love interest. There's actually a love interest. There's an aborted love story that went totally wrong. You get to see the trauma build in the character. You get to see all the things that happened to Travis in order
Right.
for him to lose his fucking mind to get to that point. You see
So the
that build up.
specific
This
character
movie doesn't. This movie almost sort of takes place after the movie because you
Yes.
don't see all the shit that made her that way. It's
it
sort
happened.
of just it's already happened, and that's why again it's sort of like a short film that
Mhm.
doesn't
Right.
give you the whole story. They could have given the whole story of all the things that happened at her previous job. They could have fleshed out the traumas and the failures more, and that's why it almost makes it like a statement. I don't know if
Yeah.
that's
The
a
other
good
No,
thing-
argument.
I think it's totally
The-
on
the-
point. They don't have her fleshed out as much so that you as the audience member feel for her. So like at the ending of this movie, you know, where you like if that's a lead character in any movie, you'd be shocked and like really sad. But in this one, you're just like sort of, or at least my experience was like, oh, okay, yeah. So she
Yeah, that's
killed
fucked up.
herself.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
because you're
fucked
not
up.
along the
But I'm
journey
not
with
like,
her.
oh, and also I didn't feel like she was like, so she didn't, the arc wasn't, so like in Rosemary's Baby, she's like, I have to protect my baby. I have to protect my baby.
yeah.
And she's just like, I just want to do what God wants. God, what do you want? And so, God, okay, what do you want? There's no like, she's like really striving for something. She's just sort of like going
Mhm.
through, which I feel like there could have been more that you're sort of on the journey with her. You're sort of like, I don't really know what's going to happen. Okay, so now she got fired. Okay, it went to the next place. And I still, you know, so I agree with the whole thing. It's not really like a full feature. It is definitely an elongated short story.
Yeah, there's also in for example, Taxi Driver, there's something compelling about a very flawed psychopathic individual saving someone as pure as a 12-year-old girl from a brothel.
Yeah.
Yeah, of
those,
course.
those two characters in Rosemary's Baby and in Taxi Driver are trying to not be victims,
Mhm.
even though they're kind of victim-y characters. They're still
Right.
trying to fight against the coming
Right.
tide.
They're active.
Yeah.
This
They're
character,
active, yeah.
like at the end, it might as well be like something that happens in a music video. You're like,
Mhm.
okay, well, I had a 3-minute relationship with this character in a song.
It's exactly like a music video. Like
Yeah.
in that
Good
sense.
description,
You're
yeah.
watching you're watching the whole film is kind of like the climax. It's like a film about a school shooter where all you see is like the kind of process of them planning out the school shooting. You don't see everything that happened that made them turn them into a crazy person. With Rosemary's Baby and with Rosemary and Travis, you're along the ride with them. You're going crazy with them.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Now this one, you're just presented with this girl, and you're like, "What the hell's going on with her? How did she get like that?" Which again is cool. It's different. I mean, that's not an easy thing to do. I can't imagine making a movie like that lean, where that I'm like actually like, what's going to happen next? Like, I
Right.
felt it was pretty, considering how lean it was quite compelling. You know,
There was
But you're
also
right.
in that era, I think you had a large number of directors who were just directors and didn't write their own screenplays. There's more of a
Right.
trend in independent film now of the sort of post-auteur thing where everybody's a writer director now, and nobody's interested in really developing a piece of material, either finding a piece of material that's really good or working with another writer to make a piece of material as great as it is.
Yeah, and
It seems
to
to
that
me
point, I
that-
think Paul Thomas Anderson is a good example of somebody who's inconsistent in that regard. Some of his films are very plot driven and very rich with different stuff going on and characters and whatever, and some of them are kind of like this. Like I think the Phantom Thread and The Master kind of fall into this category in terms of like, well, there's a whole lot of nothing happening in a lot of large chunks of these movies, but it's beautiful and it's kind of cool looking. And
But they get
that's what
greenlit.
they're going. Yeah,
They get made, they get funded because the brand, whatever. I don't know this woman's background. I don't know where she came. I assume she made a lot of successful shorts, and honestly, she's extremely talented. I don't want to.
I think this is her first feature, though, right? This is her
I
first
think so. I think she's working on
Yeah.
another one now, or I don't know if it was
with
finished.
Kristen Stewart, as I read.
but I'm agreeing with you though that I think that the trend towards like writer directors allows people to take these kinds of risks and experiment with narrative the way that they do, and I don't know. I think that filmmaking is that's another thing because of television. which is really the most story driven and probably from a writing standpoint, the most complex form of narrative going on right now in popular culture. I think like movies are kind of trying to figure out what the hell they're doing. Like, what's the direction that we're going in? Why are we making movies when, if we're trying to tell like a really good story in an hour and a half, when people are telling me, like, ever since The Sopranos, like really for 20 years, television has kind of been like edging out of movies in terms of, and now it's really gotten where television's really kind of matured. And
but also the best writers are not incentivized to write for projects like this. They're incentivized to go to HBO or what
exactly, or Prime or Netflix or whatever. Yeah. And so you're going to get you're going to get that sort of divide, I guess, but it remains to be seen. Like, I don't think heavily plot driven, like screen, I think movies, I think will make a comeback in terms of like really interesting, complex storytelling. But I mean, I think we're definitely seeing a lull in that these days. Like, because of TV. I mean, because of all the things that you're saying, Dan.
Yeah,
but
I feel a little guilty going there, because this is a young filmmaker who's very talented, and she's doing something that a lot of other film directors are not doing. Which is exploring these themes and creating a horror film that is almost a throwback to the 70s, and like psychological horror. Because the horror films, to me, I mean, other than Midsummer and Hereditary and what was his name? He's Ari Aster.
Ari Aster, and then you've got the Safdie brothers too. I love their films. I like A24. I really do.
I know
it's different.
But I think it's interesting that this movie also deals with the theme of hospice and someone who isn't religious on death's door and is okay with it. And the thing that gets the other person involved is they're not okay with just doing their job and being a hospice worker and letting the person be comfortable dying. They kind of get distracted by their own religious views or mental illness. And that's kind of like the big going off the mark of the film.
Well, that was one thing that kind of confused me in this film. The only thing I wasn't quite sure about, when she was treating the terminally ill dancer, and she was getting her, like, having those heart-to-heart moments where she was confessing that she was scared of dying, and she wanted to know, give me a little bit of your faith, Maude, those moments, and where she did some prayers with her, and then they both had these ecstatic experiences together. Was that was the woman having those ecstatic experiences with her, was that a hallucination, like a wishful thinking of Maude, or were they actually having those experiences? And then then later on, she sort of like flipped on her and was like, I don't believe in any of this. This is all BS.
No, I think she was playing her the whole time. She said dying. She tells her at the end, before she sort of turns demonic, she says dying is dreadfully boring. And she's a performer. So she found Maude and was like playing with her like she plays with everybody.
So she was being sadistic.
She was being, and she says to her, she says, I'm sorry I wasn't kind to you. Like, she's dying in that ending scene. And she says, I'm sorry I wasn't kind to you. But then she's just like a harsh woman. And I actually love that actress. I think
she was amazing.
Reminds me so much of Meryl Streep, but I just loved the way she was probably my favorite part of it, more than Morfydd Clark. But I just love the way she played it. But that character is just so great, because she's just like your typical, like, honey, there is no God. And like, she's like, she can see that this woman is suffering, and she's just like, she keeps going in, like, on her death's door, but like, keep going there. And she didn't really, it's one of those things where it's like, if you're driving and you're pissed off, don't give the finger to the wrong person, because they might shoot you. It's like, she did that. Like, she told off the wrong person and then got stabbed in the neck.
That makes sense.
That was my favorite part of the movie, was the dynamic between those two. And I wanted the movie to stay there.
Yeah.
Because the dialogue between those two was so good. And then it veers off into her isolation again.
Yeah, it was a great whole thing because she was like, and that scene where it's the birthday party scene, and she was like, I forget exactly what she said, but she said something like, Maude is like cleaning up with the cake and she's telling her friends about what happened. And she's like, I don't know if it's because she's jealous or because she wants to, I forget what it was, but it's just like, that was probably for me the most uncomfortable part because it's like, oh no, like what's she going to do to her? I almost feel like they could have pushed that even more,
Yeah.
that scene, to make it just a little bit longer to grow that discomfort, because it would have made me, depending on how they would have played it, it might have given you that feeling for Maude more. They kind of just like they had there was a little bit of a moment there that they could have done more.
Yeah.
I mean, Maude to me was obviously attracted to her. There was
Mhm.
something going on
some
there.
level, yeah.
Yeah, and that would needed to be explored a little bit more. And
They
the
were
whole
attracted to each other.
Yeah, of
Yeah.
course. And the whole thing with Jesus, I mean, the whole all the stuff with I mean, she's obviously having an orgasm from
Mhm.
God. And, they kind of have a sexual experience around that together, but it's not quite clear as to what that is. You know what I'm talking about?
She says later that she was
I feel
pretending.
them too. Yeah.
She said, "Didn't you feel it too?" And she said, "No, I was
Well, yeah, she was
pretending. I
faking.
just
She was
wanted to be."
faking
Yeah, she was faking it.
an
Oh,
orgasm,
okay.
Yeah, but Maude wasn't.
but Maude wasn't. Yeah,
No, that was, I think,
that's
Maude
right.
has this,
It's
and
not that.
I liked how they played with the body horror concept of it, where she um she was so lonely and had no relationships that it's like her only connection was through feeling. And it was either through ecstasy or pain. That was her
Right.
only way. So it's like when she has a connection, and I think that's where the character that they could have played into it more, because she has a connection with God where she feels like this almost erotic excitement. And I think when she actually feels a slight connection, she gives her this book that's about God, but it's kind of, she feels that
Right.
it's that same sort of erotic connection. It's confusing, and then she has to go to the pain to like feel, right?
Yeah.
And so I just think that's an interesting aspect from the people who are, struggling or have things going on that they need to, why do people self-harm? It's like sometimes they just need to feel alive,
Yeah.
so I think that they did that well. But yeah, I would have loved to see, more in that.
But at the same time, you needed story-wise to have that departure,
Yeah.
so that you could do the final act.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, or even more in the scene when the coworker comes over.
Right, yeah.
I was just thinking, like,
Always
if you visit
jealousy.
somebody's apartment and they're sitting there in their underwear, like looking pretty bad, and you see all this stuff on the wall, and then they're like, everybody's gonna know me. I'd be like, oh my God, what's going on?
Right.
But she's just like, okay. I mean, maybe there wasn't enough time. I don't know. They didn't play that through.
Mhm.
I
They didn't
thought
play
that
the
she
friend
was going to
through.
maybe do something to that woman in her apartment.
Or
Yeah.
just something. I don't know. It again, it felt like I liked it, but it just, maybe there could have been more. I don't know. But again, for a first-time filmmaker, because I wrote a few scripts. It's so hard to write really well done scripts. So it's like kudos to her for doing it. It's always one of those things where you could look at someone else's work and say like, oh, I would have done this, and you could have done this. She did a great job. It's just one of those things in hindsight that I'm just like, oh, it would have been great maybe to see a little bit more of that. She did talk about how she added in last minute that so she said she heard the actress that plays Maude on the phone speaking Welsh to her family and liked the sound of it, and so she basically added in during the filmmaking that scene where
Right.
she hears God, and it's
Right.
really, they recorded her voice later. They added the scene later. I don't know if they added the recording or the whole scene. They recorded Maude talking, or the actress, and they just slowed it down, but it's her speaking in Welsh. So it's,
Yeah, and
yeah.
Morfydd Clark has become like quite a superstar.
Has she? I didn't look her
Yeah,
up. Yeah.
because she recently she stars in the Lord of the Rings, the new Lord of the Rings series on
Okay.
yeah.
Nobody
So
nobody thought of Jodie Foster watching her.
only now that you mention it, I totally see
Yeah.
it. Yeah, she kind of has
Yeah.
that vibe. Yeah, it's so funny.
It was very well cast though, like the way
And
that
well
very
acted,
well.
it was well casted. Whoever the casting director was did a great job with, or the director with picking those actresses. yeah, I didn't really see any. I mean, that's the other thing too, is that, and sometimes in these low budget films, you've got some questionable acting and directing, and I didn't have any issues with that. How about you, Seth?
There's no questionable acting. No, it's very
Yeah.
truthful realism. So yeah, my only problem with this movie is like if it's a horror movie or a psychological thriller, like I was never tense. I was a little kind of lazy and tired and kind of just, I was into it, but I wasn't like riveted or worried or
You weren't on the edge of your
I
seat
wasn't on the
worrying
edge of
about
my
what was
seat.
going to happen next.
It wasn't
Yeah.
like Bone Tomahawk,
It was
where you're like, oh my God.
oh my God, are they going to cut it out?
Oh no.
Yeah, I didn't have a moment like that.
Doesn't get much better than Bone Tomahawk.
I did have to look up the word for the implement that she uses.
Well, I think
to torture herself.
I think the director was trying to tell a specific story using the genre of horror, but she wasn't concerning herself with the craft of suspense so much.
Mm-mm.
Right.
That's what I felt.
Right.
No.
And
That's why I don't think it's a true horror film.
No,
Yeah,
it's
I wouldn't
not.
put it in
It's
that
not.
category.
But the device was a commercial choice.
Yeah.
And
like I'm
listen.
curious the next one that she's working with Kristen Stewart and a bunch of other people like Ed Harris and his daughter are in it. Is that a horror film or is it like a drama?
Right. Rosemary's Baby though does have a lot of suspense to it. Something extremely suspenseful about Rosemary's Baby,
especially for its time. I mean, it was
Yeah.
it was a completely new genre. It was like the first of its kind. I can't think of anything that was like that before it.
Well, in terms of psychological horror,
yeah, it just does something. It does, but it does something different. Okay, yeah, fair enough. Obviously, it owes a great deal to Hitchcock, but it's sort of like the next generation of Hitchcock type of vibes.
It's grittier.
Yeah,
it's real.
And also, it's just very it's very Roman Polanski. Like you can like there's several films of his that are kind of like freaky like that. In that particular way.
He was following up with Repulsion.
Yeah. Even the way that he did The Pianist, the whole idea of like being, being like this lone individual who's being conspired against. I mean, he does it in The Tenant also. So like Repulsion, Rosemary's Baby, and The Tenant are considered like a trilogy. They call it the Apartment Trilogy. I don't know. They do have a lot of stuff in common. They take place in an apartment. There's this sense of isolation and like the world is conspiring against the protagonist. And that's clearly like a theme that's near and dear to Roman Polanski's heart. And I guess on that, in the sense, like this film does kind of like, I don't know if it's conscious or not, but it certainly does remind me of that type of, and it's kind of like the whole Kafka-esque thing,
She makes some deliberate choices, like, well, Judy mentioned Carrie, and De Palma was obviously very influenced by Hitchcock, but the whole thing at the end with burning in front of all those people. So it's straight out of Carrie. And not only that, the Taxi Driver references are very deliberate. I don't know if you noticed the guy with the drums, with the snare drums.
Yes, that's right.
That was Travis.
Which scene?
There's a bum playing the drums.
Yeah.
The snare drums outside the bar.
Yeah.
And in Taxi Driver, there's a scene with a guy with the drums on 50 Columbus Circle as Bickle's passing.
That's right. What about the whole Coney Island thing? Okay, so they keep having her pass by this like arcade looking place called Coney Island, and this is clearly in a town or city that's on the shore on a beach.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was Wales. It wasn't Wales?
Yeah, no, it's either Wales or England. I'm not sure where it is, but it's definitely in the British Isles somewhere. Mm-hmm. That's the sense that I get. But did you guys notice that big arcade thing that she kept passing by?
Coney Island. Yeah.
I mean, that to me was clearly very deliberate and it has some kind of meaning to it. At the very beginning of the film, that's when you first see that shot. I was like, is this taking place in Coney Island? Because it does look a lot like the boardwalk there. And I wonder if that's a real place. That's sort of just like a you know,
That's a
like
good question.
Yeah,
you
she
know.
does reference to it where I forget which part it is, but she references where it's kind of like a lower income town. And so she's sort of questioning like why did this woman
Yeah,
come
why
to
she?
die here?
Yeah.
You know?
Mm.
It's
So
actually
she
very
just
lovely. It's
yeah,
very beautiful.
the houses, yeah.
No,
Well,
actually I want to
the
see it again
town
now.
was kind of pretty, actually.
What's that?
I thought the town was kind of pretty too. It was, I mean, God, if that's a dump, that's a nice dump. You know, it's not like an
Well, it's not
American.
dumpy. It's just it's not a
Yeah,
wealthy. It's not New York
right.
City,
It's
Midtown. It's
very blue collar-y kind
yes.
Yeah,
of. Well, I mean, you know, hey, Coney Island's not a dump, but it kind of looks like that, and it kind of
Yeah.
has a lot of, and it has plenty of degenerate shit going on.
Mhm.
sure.
Yeah.
Like if, like I think that would be a good power. Like I couldn't. It that's all I was thinking about in terms of comparing it to other towns. I'm like, it does really look like a kind of carnival like little beach town bummy kind of. And I'm thinking like they probably could have made this film in Coney Island, you know,
Yeah.
with an American cast, you know, and
Yeah,
some
and I was
other
just
Absolutely.
weird,
thinking, yeah,
some
after she kills
British,
her. Yeah.
some British actress who's like sick in Coney Island. She decided to move to Coney Island. It'd be the same thing, right?
Well,
Yeah.
That's just an inversion of it. What?
you ever been to Santa Cruz, California?
No, I haven't actually
South
never
of
been to Santa Cruz.
south of San Francisco. It's kind
Or
of
like Asbury Park, right? That would be another
Right,
place like
right.
that. You know, perfect blue collar, middle class,
Sort of,
lower
yeah.
middle class, like whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, did you guys notice, and this was something I only noticed the second time watching it. Did you notice her eye color changing?
No.
I
Oh.
did not. When
You'll
did that happen?
notice it happens, I think midway through the film. I'm not exactly sure which point, but you'll notice she's got one blue eye and one brown eye. So you almost wonder, like, is she?
Oh.
I don't know. I'm not exactly sure what the motivation was for it, but it's so sort of like, is she possessed or something? Because then when I noticed it, every time I'd see it in the scene, it like creeped me out more. Like,
Wait,
so I
so
specifically notice it in the scene where her friend comes to visit her in the apartment. She's looking up at the sky, and the sky that has like the clouds are starting to
yeah, the
spin.
swirling
There was
thing,
always
yeah.
the cyclone like telling her where to go. And then she just looks at her and she's like turning her head, and you notice she's got one blue eye and one brown eye.
And wait,
Wow.
are you saying that that persists from that point on till the
In
end of the
several
film?
instances, yes. And when she's walking on the beach at the end, she has one blue eye and one brown eye.
Okay, so it sort of comes, it sort of
It
like
comes in and out. Yeah.
in and out. Okay,
Yeah.
interesting. Because I
But
feel like if
I
that,
never noticed that the first time watching it.
interesting.
And then when I noticed it, and I can't remember if I noticed it at first or I read about it, and then I saw it, and then it like creeped me out more. I was like,
That's what I'm
"Why?"
saying. Like that's why I'm hesitant after only seeing this film once. Like
Yeah,
it's like I never know when it's a film I haven't seen before if it's a film I need to see 2 or 3 times to really get it. But because like clearly this is a have like laden with a lot of visual symbolism and stuff like
Mhm.
that like you don't get it the first time. It's almost there's a lot of subliminal. It feels like there's almost a lot of subliminal stuff happening in the film. And
Mhm.
like if we had done like for example Eyes Wide Shut and I only got to see it once or Mulholland Drive or something like that, I just think maybe I do need to see this again because there may be some
I
other
definitely do.
layers of storytelling going
Yeah.
on here.
Because I'm also
Well-
wondering, like, what did happen in the thing? Because she tells her, it wasn't your fault. But if you go back, because then when the second time I watched it, and I watched that opening scene where she's like she's got gloves on, like medical gloves on, and the blood on her hands, and you
Right.
see the woman who's on the bed, and there's like blood dripping off, and you think, what happened?
right.
Like, did she lose her mind? Did she actually kill this person? Like, did she have a psychotic break and kill that woman? And the other woman's just trying to be nice? Like, I don't know if it was just an accident. Because there's several references to like the hospital, like, oh yeah, a lot of people die there, you know. Um,
Yeah.
it just and that could be like because sometimes that could just be like a sort of lazy writing choice to sort of leave it vague, right?
Yeah.
I think it works in this instance, but it really sort of it could go either way where it's like she's like an angel of death and is like killing people that she can't save. I don't know. I'm not saying that that's it, but it's like it could be. Or it could be that something happened, like a woman tried to kill herself and she tried to stop her. Like I have no idea what
Well,
happened.
you hear stories a lot. This happens of people that like they kill their patients,
Mhm.
like
Yep.
nurses that do it, and a lot of the times when they're apprehended and questioned about it, they say, "Oh well, I didn't want to see them suffer anymore," and like, and they took it upon them. I'm not at all even trying to justify it, but like I think that, they're being sincere in their sickness. Like they really were. Like I don't know what it's like to work in that environment, but I could, maybe some of these people, they see so much pain and suffering, they become unhinged. They have some kind of a crazy religious experience, and God's telling them to put these people out of their misery. Which who knows, because we don't have enough detail about what was going on beforehand to know what was actually happening with her. But that kind of stuff actually does happen in real life. Those are stories that have been, those are things that have happened repeatedly. That I heard something about a case like that on the radio recently. Not that long ago, a couple of weeks ago. So that kind of stuff happens all the time.
Yeah, I think there's a TV show about it too, on Netflix maybe.
Yeah.
I forget what it's called. It's called The Good Nurse or something.
I think I've heard of that.
I started watching it. It's a drama. I just couldn't get into it.
Did any of you see First Reformed, the Ethan Hawke, Paul Schrader movie of the priest?
No.
Okay. That's an interesting parallel.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But there's Paul Schrader. He could have taken a stab at a film like this.
Yeah.
Isolated character, religious, secular religious duality, sexual repression, trying to save somebody.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, I looked up the film that it's in post-production, and it is a romantic thriller.
Love Lies Bleeding?
Yeah.
Wow. Cool title.
Yeah.
Yeah. Looks like it has a good cast. But it's not. So I wouldn't say she's a horror filmmaker. I think you're correct in that horror was the device.
Did you watch an interview with her? Like, did you actually see her on camera talking about it, or you read stuff?
Yes, I watched one quick interview, and then I read some. So I read an article that was based in an interview with her, and I watched an interview with her and the two lead actresses.
Right on.
Yeah.
And she's English.
Yeah.
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 Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah.
So
Thanks for watching.
any closing thoughts? I think we.
I also thought of Don't Look Now for whatever reason, because of the color palette.
Yeah.
It's a great film. And the way it was shot.
Yeah, I think it's like a really
an English director. Wasn't Don't Look Now a British director? What was his name?
Nick Roeg.
Nick Roeg, yeah. And she must have been aware of that. Nicholas Roeg, right?
Yeah.
Roeg?
Roeg, Roeg. Roeg.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, Don't Look Now.
That's a great one.
It's a great movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Classic.
Yeah.
I think it's a very interesting. Like, this is one of those films where, like, I do want to go back and see it again. And it's just like, it seems like a very promising film. Like, whoever this Rose Glass is, I hope she continues doing stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm excited to see what she's got in store for us next. I think this is like a pretty strong debut film.
Oh yeah.
And,
absolutely.
it's just like different. It's different. It's different than it's different than other A24 films even, but I can see why it was picked up by them. And yeah. Anyway, I don't know. That's all I got. It's
cool.
Seth, any closing remarks?
I liked it. I've said what I've had to say. Yeah.
Okay. So I think Seth and I had discussed possibly doing because, I mean, keeping up with the theme of these sort of horror, psychological thriller type films, independent. We discussed a film that a friend of ours produced and acted in called The Vigil, right?
Yeah. So we have a call going out to her. We'll see if she gets back to us. If we don't do The Vigil, on this same theme, I thought we could do the film The Dark Song. which is
The
a really
dark
great,
song.
the dark song, yeah, which
Not
is about
familiar.
a woman who is grieving her kid, and she hires an occultist to do the Abermelin.
Oh, wait. You mean a dark song?
A dark song. A dark
Yeah.
song. Yeah.
Irish British independent horror film 2016, written and directed by Liam Gavin and starring Steve Oram and Catherine Walker.
Yeah.
Cool. It looks interesting. It's an IFC Midnight film, distributed by IFC Midnight.
Yeah. So we'll either either Malky will get back to us, and we'll do Vigil, or we'll do Dark Song.
Yeah.
Malky, the From filmmaker?
She's
not from.
I don't want to blow up her spot, but she's
Oh.
not from. She comes from background, but
But she's she's a filmmaker, right?
yeah, she's a producer, actor.
Was she the one being interviewed by that YouTuber over during COVID? It's called Malky's Media on Instagram. Is that the same Malky?
I don't know.
No idea.
No idea. Well, I'll send you her stuff, bro. You'll.
Oh, okay. No, I'm mixing her up with somebody.
No. Yeah, I think so.
All right.
Anyway, yeah, that was great, guys.
Cool.
Peace. We will see you next week.